Okay, good morning. This sounds very loud. Am I very loud? It's okay? Okay. Good morning. I'm going to be speaking in English, so has everybody got their headsets on for the interpretation? If not, get them from the back. Or do you all speak English?
I believe that the majority, in fact,
Perfect. Excellent. So, thank you, Eugene, and thank you to Esri Ukraine for the opportunity to present this morning. As Eugene mentioned, I've been to Ukraine and Kiev many times, and it's always a real pleasure to be here. I'd also like to acknowledge our sponsors. They're an important part of this event, and I would encourage you to talk to them during the coffee breaks and lunch breaks and see what they're doing. So what I would like to do over the next 40 minutes or so is talk about developments within Esri, our vision for GIS and how it's being applied, and to highlight some of the main initiatives that we're involved in to advance GIS and to advance the use of GIS. Now, as you know, GIS is a very big subject, so I can't cover everything, but looking at the program for the next 2 days, I can see you're going to get a lot of presentations, and hopefully at the end of the 2 days, you will walk away much better informed about the direction of Esri and the direction we're going with the Arcgis platform. So my goal is really to try and inspire you to think about what you can do next with Arcgis. So just a quick status report on Esri. Next year we celebrate our 50th anniversary. So in the context of an IT company and a GIS company, we've been around for quite a long time. And the good news is we continue to grow, and working in partnership with our users, we're seeing GIS being applied in many different areas. And I would just like to pay tribute to the work that you're doing. And Eugene gave some very nice examples, I think, in his presentation about how GIS is being used in Ukraine and really making a big difference in many different areas. And we heard from the Deputy Minister this morning the importance and significance of defense and security in Ukraine. GIS is a key component of building those better defense systems and making countries more secure. But also wonderful examples. I like the one from Donetsk, for example. So thank you for everything you're doing with Arcgis and your good work. So in terms of thinking about where next, again, Eugene did a nice overview, really, of some of the challenges we face. And those challenges come in many different areas, in environmental challenges, security challenges, but also social challenges. How can we engage with citizens more effectively? How can we help them to feel part of government initiatives and government policies? And then in parallel with that, we've got this massive digital transformation happening. And we, as a GIS IT company, we recognize how challenging it can be to keep pace with all those technological developments, but obviously we have to. But what's really interesting for me is when you look at developments like building the Internet of Things, this idea that almost everything and every individual is a sensor and increasingly getting connected, this idea of building a network of connections. We're in the realm of big data now. Increasingly, we're applying artificial intelligence and machine learning to what we do. And we're moving more and more of our infrastructure into the cloud, which gives us the opportunity to stand up systems very easily and very effectively, but also to create systems that are massively scalable and can respond to variations in demand. And when you stop and think about it, what we're really doing increasingly is building this digital twin. So on the one hand, we have the real world, which we occupy, but in parallel, we're building this digital version of the real world. So we have a digital version and a real world version. And that's the direction we're going, and GIS is a fundamental part of that. And this is where we get on really to the value of GIS. So in this increasingly complex world, this increasingly digital world, what does GIS help us do? It helps us collect that data. It helps us manage it in a logical way. It helps us to analyze that data, to bring new insights to that data, and ultimately to make better decisions from that data. And a lot of that is through increasing collaboration across many different disciplines, because it's not just one discipline that can solve the challenges we face. It's a multidisciplinary, interdependent approach. So GIS today is really about providing that platform for integration of people and data and organizations, providing a platform for communicating more effectively and solving problems together. And as Eugene highlighted, and as I'm going to talk about in the remainder of my presentation, GIS, and ArcGIS in particular, continues to evolve, building on all those developments in the IT world, but other developments around, for example, big data. And again, as Eugene highlighted, we're now on the next version, if you like, of ArcGIS in terms of its technical architecture. We've now built and are maintaining what we call the WebGIS architecture. And this is a very powerful technology platform. It's built on the idea of, it's a services-based architecture that allows you to bring together distributed data, to abstract that data through the portal where you can organize that data and provide access to it, and then deliver that geographic information either to a desktop or through a very focused app or on a mobile device, for example. And it's a very open and easy to implement technical architecture. So it really is a very compelling version of ArcGIS and GIS that is much more easily accessible and much easier to connect. So what I would like to do now is just highlight some of the main developments with ArcGIS. But before I do that, I'd like to reflect on ArcGIS in terms of different ways that we can look at ArcGIS. So many of you, I think, will think about ArcGIS as a set of components. So I expect many of you in the audience are desktop users. Others may have been introduced to ArcGIS through ArcGIS Online or through building a portal. And again, Eugene gave some very nice examples of the different portals that are being built in Ukraine. The point I would like to stress now is that you need to see those different components not as individual components, but as an integrated platform. So what you do on the desktop can immediately be available on the mobile device in the field, for example. The other way we can think about ArcGIS, and I'd just like to emphasize what Eugene said, is as a set of systems. Again, not a set of discrete individual systems, but a set of interconnected systems. So a system for building the system of record, as we would call it. So many of you are collecting what we would call authoritative data. That could be the land cadastre, for example. It could be the mapping agency. It could be a municipality that is collecting information about its locality and the planning restrictions and so on there. It could be a private business that's collecting data. Building that system of record, which then provides the basis for engaging with your users. This could be the citizens, it could be professional users, it could be people in the academic sector. And the third aspect of this system, and this really gets to the essence of GIS, is the powerful analytical capabilities we have within ArcGIS to bring new insight into the data not only that you hold, but through this web GIS pattern to be able to bring in other data easily and integrate it and analyze it effectively. And so gradually we're building this system of systems that help us address the challenges we face. The third way to look at ArcGIS, and this is a really important development, I think, and this is relatively recent in the last 2 to 3 years. Traditionally, and I imagine most people in this room, would think of GIS as something for the professional. There's been a big shift to make GIS available to the non-professional audience, what we would refer to as the people who are engaged in location intelligence. And what they need is a very simple platform, GIS platform, that they can apply to their business area. So think of ArcGIS in those two ways. It covers the complete spectrum from the simple, so-called simple user to the more advanced GIS professional. And the power, the real power of GIS is its ability to organize and manage all aspects of geographic knowledge. Not just the data, but also the apps that go with the data, and also the individuals and organizations that interact with that data. So it's very important to give the users an identity and to control who has access to what particular data at what particular time. And ArcGIS allows you to bring in many different types of data. Not only the imagery data that many of you are working with and the vector and raster data, but also increasingly 3D data, real-time data, and big data. So starting to bring the power of GIS to analyzing big data, but also LiDAR data, and a relatively new development is bringing in what we would call unstructured data. So the ability to take data in, for example, a Word document, to analyze it and pull out of that document the geospatial data. Very, very useful, actually, in the defense and security industry, for example. So through GIS, we create effectively this common language from a variety of different data types. And it's important also, and Eugene touched on this, is the ability to integrate ArcGIS with other systems. And the key message here really is about being open. And there is a lot of discussion in the industry about open data, open source, open standards, interoperability. Many different terms we use. And whatever model we go, either the COTS, commercial off-the-shelf software, which is the Esri model, or the open source model, at the end of the day, what's important is the ability to integrate data and systems through an open platform, and that's what we strive to do. So addressing, yes, the standards that come out of OGC, for example, and ISO, but also focusing on direct integration where it makes sense with other systems. So that could be AutoCAD, for example, and I'll touch on that a bit later. But what we also do within Esri is we publish a lot of our, not only our content, but our APIs as open APIs. And that's very important, particularly for developers who want to build on the ArcGIS platform. The other important message I want to get across, because this is very important, is the fact that ArcGIS is secure. So within the US, you can imagine we have to meet very stringent standards when it comes to security of systems. And so we've put a lot of effort into this area to make sure that ArcGIS Online and other components of ArcGIS are secure. So now let's look at some of the highlights and some of the most recent developments with ArcGIS. This for me is interesting. I joined Esri about, well, almost exactly 11 years ago, actually. And when I joined Esri, Esri was predominantly about building software. What we've seen over the last 11 years is a huge increase in the amount of content we now make available through ArcGIS. So we've brought together a vast collection of content, including base maps, and much of that information we've sourced from, for example, national mapping organizations. So we're building this authoritative global base map at multi-scale. We're bringing in a lot of imagery, which in many cases has been provided by our partners, but also by our users, and includes most recently access to the Copernicus Sentinel data, for example. And we have a whole range of other demographic and other data. So this is a huge collection of data that is now available directly to the users along with the software. And it's a very powerful combination. And at the heart of what we do, and a lot of what you do, is about producing informative, beautiful maps that communicate a lot of complexity very easily. So we continue to invest in the functionality that's needed for mapping to support both professional users. So the area I work is with the national mapping agencies, and many of those are using ArcGIS to produce beautiful cartographic maps. This is an example from Switzerland. And what we're able to do now, increasingly, is to automate the process of producing that mapping and producing mapping at different scales. So Swiss Topo have now automated a lot of their production to allow them to go from the largest scale to smaller scales. And here's another example from the Dutch Cadastre, who've now recognized huge efficiencies and savings in automating the process. And this is just an example of their 1 to 50,000 scale mapping that they produce from their 1 to 10,000 scale base map. So we have the tools for the professional user, but as I mentioned before, increasingly what we're doing with ArcGIS is opening it up to the non-professional, the people who are not necessarily cartographers, to allow them to create beautiful maps. And we've introduced something called smart mapping. And this is, I think, very clever. It's a data-driven approach. And what I mean by that is the software will analyze your data, and it will make suggestions on how you can present that data, for example, in terms of the symbology. And then you're able to look at those different options and select what you think is best for your particular map and your particular audience. The other big area of development is around 3D. So increasingly we're able to capture a lot of data as 3D, or using ArcGIS, we're able to use the software to, for example, extrude 2D building footprints using the attribute information in the data to create 3D models. So there are different ways in which we can create these 3D models, either using the software or from the data, LiDAR data, for example, that we bring in. And a really interesting development for me, and we talked about this a little bit earlier when I was talking about being open, is the direct integration now we're building with some other systems, in this case with Autodesk. So what we're now starting to do is link the world of GIS and the world of engineering and CAD in a much more directly integrated way. So this allows us to connect the worlds of GIS and BIM, Building Information Modeling. And here's just an example from London, which is where I happen to live, where ArcGIS is being used to support a huge project in London, the Crossrail Initiative, which is building a railway line right across London, much of it underground. And for any of you who've been to London, you can imagine what an engineering feat that is, given how much there is above ground and also below ground. But what they've been able to do is use ArcGIS as the bridge to all those CAD and engineering documents and other documentation, and by building a portal, provide easy access into all that data. So there are something like 5,000 contractors working on this project, and through ArcGIS, they're able to easily access this information. And because of the impact of this project, they've also built a very nice portal so citizens can go and access relevant data that shows where the construction is happening, the status of the construction, and so on. So GIS is really acting as an integrating force. What we've also got within the 3D component of ArcGIS is some very powerful analytical capabilities. So we're able to do things like view-shed analysis, for example, or other forms of analysis using the 3D data. And I'm just going to run through some examples that actually come from Norway, where we've been doing some work recently. This is just a graphic that shows how you can combine cadastral data, building data, and planning information, which you could do in a 2D way, I accept. But I think when you present it in 3D, it's a more compelling message. You can also do interesting things around view analysis, for example. So these buildings in blue in the center, what we've done is some analysis to see how well they can view the lake, in this case. And in many countries, if you've got a view of water, for example, it increases the value of your property. So in Denmark, for example, they use view-shed analysis to work out property values and land taxation. We can also, in the environmental area, start looking at things like the thermal footprint from buildings. Or we can look at how the shadow effect changes as the sun moves. What we can also do using virtual reality, and again, this is a relatively new development, is not only understand what's on the surface, but also what's below the surface. So today, an engineer or a maintenance technician can walk out with their virtual reality headset on, and they can see, as they walk along, see, in quotes, what is below the surface. We can also, and this I think is an interesting area, is we can now start to combine both 3D data from land with 3D data from the marine environment. And traditionally, these have been two actually very separate communities. But when you think about it, most of the world's population actually lives in the coastal zone. So more and more, we need to combine these data sets from these different communities to get a better understanding of the coastal zone. And that example brings me on to imagery. Again, if we look back, traditionally, imagery has been seen as a very separate system. So you would have had your image processing capabilities and workstations, and you'd have had your GIS. And there wasn't necessarily a connection between them. Today, ArcGIS could be thought of just as an imagery processing system. So we've put a huge amount of effort into imagery over the last few years. So providing you with the capabilities to generate your ortho imagery, for example, to manage that data, to visualize and analyze that data. And some exciting developments around, for example, using drones. And these provide the ability to very quickly capture imagery and in the same day have that imagery in the GIS system. And what we're able to do now through Arcgis Pro, and I think you'll hear more about this later, is we're able to combine both the 2D and the 3D within the same window and analyze the two together. We're also seeing some really nice examples of imagery portals. This is an example from Norway, where they're providing access now to an archive of imagery that goes back over 50 years. And it's very much a collaborative portal. So not only the National Mapping Agency, but also the municipalities that are collecting imagery data can upload the data to this portal and make it accessible. And this is running in the Amazon cloud. So this is ArcGIS technology, image server, in the Amazon cloud that's doing all the processing of the data dynamically and very fast and making it available to citizens. And you can do some nice things with this data. You can compare different versions of data over different times. This is some imagery from Bergen on the west coast of Norway, where I was 3 weeks ago. And this just shows you, using the slider, how easy it is to compare imagery from different epochs. And they provide some nice tools also along the top here, the toolbar, that lets you do things like measure areas or measure distances very easily. And also a very nice capability to then show that same data as web scenes as 3D data. And again, this is just the Bergen area, which you get a much better sense of the geography. I touched on artificial intelligence and machine learning earlier. Again, this is an area where we're putting increasing effort. We're seeing the value of this in many different applications, particularly in the areas of defense, for example. So we're now able to integrate ArcGIS with some of these AI frameworks and platforms and use the power of ArcGIS and those AI platforms and machine learning capabilities to start doing things like advanced object detection from the imagery. So to use through machine learning to build up the rules and the learning from the data to automatically identify and extract features from the data. A lot of you, I suspect, are beginning to work with real-time data. So this is yet another source of data that we have to manage. Often huge volumes of data, often of variable quality, for example. But it's all part of this idea of building up the Internet of Things, this idea that we're all sensors and all objects are sensors, and bringing that information into the GIS. So we're seeing some really nice applications, for example, in the areas of transportation. This little graphic here from the port of Hamburg, top right, where they're tracking not only the vessels that are coming in and out of Hamburg, but they're also tracking the vehicles on the roads. And that's important because, as you can see from the map, there are a number of bridges that go over and they have to try and synchronize when the bridges are going up and down and when the vessels and the traffic are flowing. One of the key aspects of GIS, I guess, and historically many of us would think of GIS in these terms, are the spatial analytical capabilities that we have within the GIS. And many of those are very comprehensive and indeed are for the GIS professional. But again, on this theme of opening up access to ArcGIS and making it easier to use for different users, we've introduced something called ArcGIS Insights. And again, this is a very powerful and easy to use set of capabilities, very intuitive, that allow you to analyze data and create very nice outputs in map form or in tabular form around the data that you're working on. In today's world, most users expect to have access to data through very to easy use apps. So for any of you who are using smartphones, we're very comfortable with the idea of clicking on the iPhone, for example, and accessing information through an app. And those apps tend to be very focused and very good at doing one thing. And really that's how increasingly users expect to engage with GIS. So ArcGIS comes with a number of configurable, very easy to deploy apps that don't need any programming skills per se. So we provide the templates that allow you to easily configure those apps for different audiences, for different uses. And here are just a few illustrations. One of the most popular apps that we've developed is something we call story maps. I don't know if any of you have built story maps in Ukraine, but again, these are very easy to use templates. We give you a number of different options for the type of story map you can create. And these story maps allow you to bring in not only maps, but also imagery, video, text. And they're a very nice way for communicating with your different audiences. And you can go to the ArcGIS story map website, and you can see many, many different examples of these story maps. They've been hugely popular and hugely successful. increasingly also, people want to work with GIS in the field. So we provide a number of apps that help you go into the field and collect data. So we have a set of apps around data collection, collector, survey 1, 2, 3. Again, these are easily configurable and allow you to collect information in the field and make that immediately available to people back in the office. So we provide a number of those app templates, but we also provide the capability to build your own apps as well, using our Arcgis App Builders. And these are very neat, I think, because they allow you to build an app that can run on any device. So you build the app once, and using App Studio, you can deploy on any device, whether it's an iPhone or whatever. One of the big shifts with ArcGIS has been the move from ArcMap to Arcgis Pro. I would be interested to know if any of you are using Arcgis Pro. Has anyone started to use Arcgis Pro, or are you all using ArcMap? One hand. Okay. 2 hands. 3 hands. Okay. That's good. Yes. That's more than I expected. So, so for those of you who are using ArcMap, don't panic. It's not going away tomorrow. We are going to continue to maintain ArcMap, but the important message I need to give to you today is that all the development, all the new functionality is going into Arcgis Pro. So over time, you're going to need to migrate from ArcMap to Arcgis Pro. And what I would encourage you to do now is to start playing, in quotes, with Arcgis Pro. And I think you'll see, in terms of the user experience and in terms of the functionality that's available, the ability, for example, to work both 2D and 3D, I think you'll be very excited and hopefully inspired by what you can do with Arcgis Pro in the future. So at the moment, we're working hard to build equivalence between ArcMap and Arcgis Pro. So very soon we will have full equivalence with ArcMap, and then, as I say, all new development effort and new functionality will be going into Pro, but we will continue to maintain ArcMap. The other area, and Eugene touched on this, I think, is we're putting a lot of effort into ArcGIS Online. So this is ArcGIS in the cloud, software as a service, and providing more and more functionality into ArcGIS Online, along with more and more content. So we continue to provide that core platform, that base technology that you can take and build applications for your particular area of interest. What we also provide to help you in that process is what we call ArcGIS Solutions. So we've built a number of solutions for different industries. So to support local and state government, for example, to support the utility sector. And again, what we provide are some standard data models, some templates that you can configure, some workflows that support what you want to do in those different industries. But it's still for you to take those templates and build your application. Looking a bit further ahead, what we're now starting to provide is those solutions more as configured solutions, configured products that can be applied to different areas. And Eugene talked about these solution products earlier. What I would like to just focus on is the Arcgis Hub product. And I think this is a very important product in terms of how we can improve engagement with citizens. And it links also to what I want to touch on now, which is around building spatial data infrastructures. So in Europe, as many of you probably know, we have an initiative called Inspire. Inspire is a legal directive that applies to the 28 member states and helps them, or actually compels them, to build an SDI for their country, but also one that can be interoperable and can work across Europe. So we've been working with a number of the member states and particularly mapping organizations who are often the responsible authority for SDI to build those Inspire compliant portals, and here are just a couple of examples from Estonia and Cyprus, so that they can meet the requirements of those directives. Now, more generally, what we see with spatial data infrastructures and portals is huge success in making data available, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the data will be used. So what we're starting to work on is the next generation of spatial data infrastructures, where we think in terms not just of making data accessible, but how can we really engage with citizens and users so that they make use of that data and create more of a two-way engagement between the data provider and the data user. So here's an example from Ireland where they've taken Arcgis online and they've built a portal to support the open data policy in Ireland to make available a wide range of geospatial information. But what I've highlighted here also is you can see with the portal comes some functionality to create your own map. So you can use the Arcgis platform to identify what data is available, and then you can create new products from that data. You can create mashups of that data, and you can publish the results back to the portal. So you're starting to create more of a two-way engagement, and you can see SDI as more of a collaborative platform. I think what's also very important with spatial data infrastructures, though, is not just seeing them as a technical platform and a platform providing data, but putting those in the context of national initiatives or local initiatives. So you often hear the term smart now. So we want to create smart cities, smart nations, smart defense organizations, etc. So somehow what we need to do is take all those good initiatives and find ways to connect those to the GIS. So what we've been working on with Arcgis Hub is taking those policy drivers and breaking them down into what we call initiatives. So there could be a policy, for example, around making a city safer in terms of reducing road accidents. And you can take that and create an initiative around reducing road deaths. And here's just an example from Los Angeles, which was probably the first geo-hub that we created, where they had this vision of reducing road deaths and road deaths down to zero. So what we do with Arcgis Hub is we take that policy driver, that policy initiative, and then we create a very focused portal which describes the initiative, provides the data and the apps that can be used to improve the situation, in this case road deaths, and different ways to engage with citizens. So you provide apps to citizens, for example, who can report on accidents they're seeing or problems they see with the road network. We can give them an identity and they can become part of this community that's working together to solve a particular problem. So the direction we're going with SDIs and these portal initiatives is really about creating that stronger citizen engagement, that two-way engagement. So I'm conscious that my time is almost up. I've covered a lot in a short time, and I hope I haven't thrown too much at you today. I mean, obviously, as we go forward, we're continuing to work on many different initiatives. You will continue to see more and more releases from Esri in shorter timescales than you've experienced in the past. And we will be addressing all these major IT and GIS initiatives as we go forward. The good news for you is we do offer a lot in terms of support, in terms of your professional support and your learning and helping you to use ArcGIS. Please take a look at what's available, including many online training courses. but also some fantastic books we publish through Esri Press. So please do take advantage of that. And what I would say in terms of ending is that, you know, we all recognize, I think, the challenges we face either at the global, national, or local level. For me, the good news is that GIS, it's not the solution, but it's definitely part of the solution. And again, I would like to recognize the work that you're doing, which is making a real contribution to addressing those challenges and making a real difference. So I hope with that, I've inspired you to think about what you're going to do next when you leave this conference. And I know with the presentations that are coming up, there are many, many exciting developments for you to take advantage of. So I'm here for the next 2 days. I hope I have the chance to talk to you, as many of you as possible. And I wish you a very good conference. Thank you.
Thank you.